appreciate all of you who are watching this. I'm understanding that many of you wanted to attend the Focus on Inclusion conference, but that the weather got in your way. But we are hardy individuals, and you're going to continue to get information as we are doing our best to get this to you. So as a part of this, and you've probably seen this if you watched any of the other sessions, is that the IDOE would love it if you would respond to the information relating to the IEP system. So if you can opportunity, if you can scan this with your phone and then just go at it, please. We request this work to improve the services to all kids. As I work in many states, not very many states actually ask for participants to give information relating to what's going on. So this is a rare opportunity for you to have an impact about how to improve services relating to the IEP system, which, as we all know, is vital and important as part of this process. So just take a second, pause the video. Please do that. We really do appreciate that. It's a service for you and your colleagues for you to be able to provide this. Okay. So today, what we're going to talk about is it takes a village. Just why collaboration, providing services like supplementary aids and services and SDIs are so very important. And I can't emphasize this enough as a part of this. Because when if you've attended any of the other sessions that I've done, either as part of this conference or previous conferences, you know that I focus on making sure that we provide an appropriate education to kids eligible for special education related services. However, it takes a team to do this. It's not just one person who does this. If it's just one person, that'd be so much easier and so much something we just change that person's behavior, things like this. But it takes a team to realize all the services, all the needs, all the supports, and all the efforts to provide appropriate services for our kids. And so that's why if you are a general education teacher, I applaud you for what you're doing and on all the services that you have to do with your kids. If you're a special education teacher, you're having to be working with a lot of individuals. If you are an administrator, you're working with a lot of individuals as a part of this. But it's your team that we need to pay attention to provide these services and ensure what goes on. So just keep that in mind, that we all play different roles. All of them are important. So if those of you had problems getting bus drivers, you realize bus drivers are important. Those of you who've got your districts have had problems getting cafeteria workers, you realize that the cafeteria workers are important. Those of you who've had problems getting good janitors, you realize that good janitors, we are all important. We all play a role, and keep that in mind as we talk about this, and keep this in mind as we address this. Okay. So I'm going to start by just talking about a student that I worked with. And what was interesting about this student and why this student's important is I want you to think about the team aspect of this and keep this in mind as we address this, and keep this in mind about when we're addressing this, and just pay attention to all the roles and all the people who participated in this. Josh, and this is a case from the pre-times. This is actually in the year right before COVID. So, but it's just, I'm using this as an example to kind of clarify what all the roles we have and how important it is that we do this. Josh is a 7th grade boy. He had pretty significant needs relating to language arts, relating to learning disabilities. How significant? When he was in elementary school, he was receiving services for 2 hours a day for language arts, reading, written language, and spelling, but it was about 2 hours a day. And then he was making progress. He seems to be doing fine, seems to be making progress appropriately in his curriculum, things like this. When he transitioned to the middle school, and this is the first problem. This is something we need to pay attention to. When he transitioned to the middle school, his services were cut down from the 2 hours a day that were listed in his IEP down to 48 minutes a day, because that's what the time commitment that was allowed as part of the schedule. And so why I share this with you is that there was no evaluation, no indication whatsoever that his services needed to be cut down. And there was nothing that we needed to provide or reduce what's going on. And I mean this literally, is the decision, and you can see this is as a fatal flaw here. Pay attention to this, and I know a lot of districts do this, is decisions were being made based on administrative convenience, not based on the individual needs of the child. And that's a fatal flaw. And I say this, and I truly say this, is that if we have an evaluation, a reevaluation that indicates that he no longer needs 2 hours a day of services, and we as a team no longer think he needs this, I'll be there for you. I'll make sure that then that's and it's appropriate for the child. However, if you make a decision based on administrative convenience, yeah, that first is not right. First is not individualized to the child's needs. It's based on your needs, not on the child's needs, and that's not how the decision should be made. But you can see as a team decision why this is so important. This team needs to focus on this. How it came to our attention is that he started having significant behavior problems in science and social studies. In fact, in his science and social studies classes, he was being kicked out of his science social studies classes 4 out of 5 days a week. And it was posing significant problems. And so it affected him rather dramatically, things like this. And so what you can see, so we came in and the parents were really upset. They hired an attorney. The attorney came in, and then I came in and did an analysis of what's going on. And you can see this. But the parents got an attorney. They were concerned about the behavior problems, rightly so. There was concern about the behavior problems that were existing by him, and they were concerned that there was issues that needed to be addressed as a part of this. But what's interesting, there have been no complaints or due process hearings, even forms of mediation or facilitated IEP requests in this district. This is a district where there have been no demands or changes whatsoever. And as a result, this district was doing, basically, for lack of a better term, the same exact thing they were doing previously without paying attention to this. So we analyzed, and you said, I addressed this a minute ago, that there was a dramatic change in services for him. Dramatic change in services from when he was in elementary to when he was in middle school. Dramatic change, things like this. The district was not really doing any progress monitoring data. There was just very little progress monitoring data. If those of you administrators attended my session for administrators, or the session I did with Mitch Yell, you understand that I'm a huge fan of dramatically increasing your progress monitoring data. Not just partially, but dramatically increasing your progress monitoring data and using that. But this is a district where they had very poor and very little progress monitoring data. The problem is, it's interesting, he had an IEP that focused solely on his behavior issues. And so there was no real plan in the IEP to address his escalating behavior problems. It was basically just noting that he was being kicked out of the class, not in the IEP, but the administration was aware, and the teachers were aware, that he was being kicked out of his class 4 out of 5 days a week. And the last thing is, he'd had the same reading goal for 3 years. There basically, since there was no progress monitoring data, we were able to really ascertain, yay or nay, whether he was making progress, because the goal remained the same. So it actually indicated that there had been no progress in what's going on. What's interesting about this is, when we came in, and it took us a lot longer to realize this than I should be willing to admit. But why was he being kicked out of his class? Well, he was sitting in a 7th grade reading class, reading at a 7th grade science and social studies class, reading at a 2nd grade level. Not inconsistent with what you see with a lot of kids with eligible for special education in the category learning disabilities. What's interesting about this is how the class was structured. How the class was structured was that the teacher would go down the row, and the first kid would read the first line in the book, the second kid would read the second line, third kid would read the third line, fourth kid would read the fourth line. Now, the teacher started in different places in the room, so it wasn't always kid 1 in row 1, things like this. But Josh would count and figure out where this was, just 2 or 3 kids in front of him. And then he would yell, kick, scream, throw something that allowed him to get out. That would allow him basically to be kicked out of the class. And so he did not want to be embarrassed in front of his friends, because he couldn't often read the sentences. And so what's really interesting about this is, it was probably the easiest decision he made that day. I mean, at lunch, choosing tater tots or French fries was probably a harder decision for him to make. But I share this with you, is it was a decision that he was making every single day. And why was it only 4 out of 5 days a week? On day 5, they would do a test, and there was no demands for reading in front of his friends. So he was not going to be embarrassed. He still did poorly on the test, because I don't know if you understand, there's a correlation between actually reading the material, attending class, and participating, and being able to do well on tests. Yeah, call me slow, but that's what the problem was. But so he was having significant problems. Why is this important? Why is this important? Okay. There were 7 other fifth, sixth, and seventh grade boys who are also found to not be making progress. There are multiple other sixth and seventh grade boys. Boys, why is it boys? Is because boys win special education. Just to let you know that some of you maybe heard me say this in other venues, is that boys rock special education. We win every single category. Females, you're paying too much attention or behaving too well or reading too good. I think we're under identifying females, but boys, man, we do rock special ed. Okay. So I'm saying this is we were able to identify others who are having significant problems as a part of this, because one of the things that I have emphasized in the other presentations is that when you have a problem, whatever said problem is, not whatever said problem is, you try to determine the focus and facts and see if it affects other kids. So keep this in mind as we address this, and keep this in mind as we pay attention to this. But you can see, since there are other boys who are involved in this, who had other problems as a result of this, you can see how important it is for the team to pay attention to this. It's a team thing because these kids, he was having problems in a general education classroom. The special education teacher was writing the same goals, and administratively, we were assigning the child based on administrative convenience, not based on any convenience for the child or needs of the child. So keep this in mind, right? Use this as a background. Use this as a background and use this and keep thinking about this, because we're going to continue on talking about this, but I'm going to focus now more on about what do we really mean by SDI, and focus on what is SDI, okay? Because we talk about SDI. We talk about SDI, we talk about specially designed instruction. Some states, just to let you know, some states it's part of the determination. I mean, it's from, and if you basically can interpret the federal regulations that says in your Article 7 regulations, which I understand are being potentially changed as we speak. But yeah, good luck, whatever the new one is. I'm just good luck. Okay? What is basically to provide special education, to determine whether a child is eligible for special education related services. It's a 2-part test. First, the child has to have a disability. And second, the child has to have the need of specially designed instruction from a special education teacher. This is important because SDI is the specially designed instruction that we provide to the kids. And so that is what we need to focus on as a part of this. And that's what we need to pay attention. And that's what we need to address. And I mean this literally, is that we need to address this and pay attention to this, because without this, without a really good understanding of where we are with this, and emphasizing where we're going with this, it really does pose us a problem, because what we have to think about this is what we're doing and making sure that we are providing appropriate supports. And that's what's important about this, making sure we're providing appropriate supports and appropriate information to the kids so that they can understand and make progress with what we're doing. Now, so what I'm going to start going through is just basically walking you through the components of SDI so that we all have a really good understanding, and that we all are very clear about what is expected and when these things are expected and what we can do as a part of this, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do and emphasize this as we talk about this, okay? And so, so first, what is SDI, okay? And what is SDI? Well, it's the most important part of what we're doing, okay? It really is. And what it focuses on is it focuses on making sure that what we're doing is providing appropriate services to kids. And it focuses on what is this, okay? Specially designed instruction. And I mean this literally. What is specially designed instruction? It means it's no cost to the parents to meet the unique needs of a child's disability, okay? But it's interesting. In order to provide, and I mean this literally, in order to provide special education, we must provide the SDI in order to comply with the IDEA, okay? The design and delivery of the specially designed instruction is the essential and core of special education. I can't emphasize this enough, all right? So keep that in mind. So what is it more? Think about this. The regulations define specially designed instructions as adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child under what content, either the methodology, the delivery, the instruction, to address the unique needs of what's going on. So think about this. We're going to change the content. We're going to change the methodology. We're going to change the delivery of instruction so kids can actually receive appropriate instruction. Wait, there's more, okay? We also want to ensure access to the general education curriculum. So we try to help with providing access to what's going on. This is where the team aspect again comes in as a part of this. The team aspect is important because some of the specially designed instruction can actually be provided in the general education classroom. All of the specially designed instruction does not have to be provided in a special education setting because remember, special education is a service. It is not necessarily a place. And we've got to focus on that as a part of this. So why do we do this? Okay. Well, let's make sure we understand why. Is because there are kids out there who have needs. There are kids out there who have very specific needs. And as a part of their needs, what we have to think about this is making sure it is what with the purpose of this is to provide what we're doing specifically to help them. Because without the special help that we're going to be providing for them, is they will have severe problems. They will not make progress in the curriculum, and they will be things will just get worse for them. Okay. So first, why? To meet the unique needs of the child with a disability. That's the first thing. We're not talking about an LD service. We're not talking about an autism service. We're talking about an individual service for a child. We're talking about what these child's needs are. So that the present levels of the child's IEP dictate what these services are. There are not some special LD services. There are not some special autism services. We're going to provide unique needs based on what's going on. Second, we want to address the gaps. And we really want to address the gaps. And this is interesting because we've been coming up talking about this for the past 23 months. Since COVID has been hit, we've realized that there are some kids who have fallen further and further behind. Why I mean this is we're trying to think, how can we move these kids up because of the lack or different instruction that they've received and the fact that some of these kids have fallen further behind. Why is this important? Some of these kids, we want to address their gaps and try to do if we can accelerate academic, but it's not just academics. And too often we focus solely on academics. We also need to focus on behavioral supports. And we need to think about how we can get these kids rise up. And what's interesting about this is when you're talking with teachers, some of these kids lost a lot as when they were on homebound instruction or receiving instruction in the home over the past 23 months. And what we've seen is a lack of progress on functional performance and ability to interact with others. Teachers have been working as teachers have been in the field for years, talk about an immaturity that they're seeing. And so what we're going to have to think about is what can we do to raise these kids up? So it's not just academics, it's also functional, but it's also focusing on functional performance and behavioral supports towards age-appropriate peers and things like this. Why also? Because we want to ensure that these kids receive a free, appropriate public education. This is vital. This is important. We really want the kids to receive an appropriate education. Okay. But last, this is just, and think about this. We have kids who have disabilities at no fault of their own. They have disabilities at no fault of their own. And what we need to do is just be good, decent human beings, not just because of the legal requirements, but just be good, decent human beings to ensure all school programs, activities, and environments are accessible and we allow them to participate. I can't emphasize that enough. I truly cannot emphasize that enough, that we need to think about these kids who have disabilities, who don't choose to have disabilities, but they have disabilities, and we need to do what we can to improve services for them so that they can and make progress in the curriculum, okay? So who is this for? Okay. Well, no. Okay. There's different levels of who's. Okay. Let's talk about who can design specially designed instruction. Okay. So typically we ask for special education teachers to help design and monitor the specially designed instruction and the related services. And it's because it's not just the special education, it's often also we need to include the related services aspect of this. But do this in collaboration with the general education teachers and staff, the team aspect. Focusing on this is bringing this together because it does take all of us working together, okay? But that's typically who we ask as part of this is the specially designed instruction is often designed and monitored by the special education teachers and related services personnel, things like this. But who can provide it? That's a great question, okay? Obviously, special education teachers. Technically, the term is highly qualified special education teachers. I know some of your districts are just excited to get special education teachers, but the technical term in the law is highly qualified ones. But also related service providers within the area of licensure, thing like this. But also general education teachers, therapy assistants, paraprofessionals under the supervision and discussion with special ed teachers and related services may also assist in the provision of STI. However, they are not to be the primary provider of the STI. That's an important thing, is they're not to be the primary provider. But they may do something in conjunction with what they are seeing from the special education teacher as a part of this. Okay, so keep that in mind. How do we do this? Whoa. Well, there's a number of different ways, and we'll get to this. Okay. This how can we make sure that this is being provided? Well, classroom therapy, walkthroughs, observations. We have special ed teachers and others walk through what's going on. Documentation of service provision, treatment notes is a vital part of this process. Data sheets, progress monitoring tools, IEP progress reports, attendance records, grades. I mean, there's a variety of things that we make sure that what we're doing is a part of this. But if the kid needs specially designed instruction, that is our obligation to do this. Okay. So what do we think about this? Okay. So the SDI process. What is the SDI process and how do we go from this? Now that you have just a little bit of background of what we're expecting as a part of this, again, a team thing. It's a team thing. That was a visual reference for those of you who weren't paying attention. But it's interesting about this is it's a team process, and keep this in mind. So the SDI process. And so let me tell you what I'm doing in Guam. For those of you who've ever been to Guam, half a day. But it's interesting about this. Chamorro. But it's interesting about this is Guam is a U.S. territory. It is the furthest U.S. territory from any part of the United States whatsoever. It's I think it's from D.C. I saw it's over 8,000 miles from Washington D.C. It's from Indiana right now, it's 15 time zones differences, but I've been doing work in Guam for the past 5 years. And the pre-times I would go there twice a year for years. I was doing that. I still Zoom with them and my colleagues there out every 2 weeks to solve things. What's interesting is, and I want you to think about this, is what they have as a goal, and this is a goal that you guys should strongly consider. What's interesting is I'm working with them, changing everything. Guam is a unitary system. It's one large school district on the island with 24,000 kids. And so in the whole district. Why I share this with you is they have as a goal that all the teachers will work together. They will work together to solve the problems, and that they will understand what their role in the process is, and that kids will then make progress. Okay. I'm betting that you guys have that same goal. I'm betting you have the goal that the teachers will work together to solve the problems, and that all the kids will make progress. And that's things like this. All right. There's that classic phrase. I think it is from, and I may be misquoting. There's the classic phrase from the book Atomic Habits. If you haven't read Atomic Habits, I do recommend it. James Clear does a very nice job describing it. The audiobook is actually really nice. Starts with a good story about his baseball career. But I share this with you in Ohio. But I share this with you is there's a phrase. We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Think about the systems. I'll say that again. We do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. So what is the systems that you have in place for this? Do you have systems that are helping identify kids? Do you have systems that help clarify what teachers' roles are in the process? Do you have systems that help clarify what to do when there's a problem? If you can change the systems, you can then work towards changing your goals. You can have the most amazing goal. I have a goal. I have all sorts of goals. Okay, but unless I change my systems, those goals will not. Nothing will get towards those goals. I will fall to my systems. So that's something that I want you to keep in mind. Again, this is a quote from the book Atomic Habits, description from Atomic Habits. It's in the first couple of chapters. You don't have, it is a really good book, actually. I do recommend it. I don't work for that publisher, don't know him. I don't get any money by endorsing it. If you want books that I do endorse and get money from, just Google my name in Amazon. What's interesting about this is that pay attention to this in the systems that we have and the systems that you are putting in place. So I talk about this because you need to think about the whole team responsibility for this system and the whole team necessity as we talk about this. Keep this in mind as we address this. Okay, so here it is. Okay, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Okay, I may have misspelled his last name there, and I apologize. I think it's Claar, but I might have that wrong. But the book is called Atomic Habits. But think about this: change your systems. Right. So step one. So what is step one in the SDI process? And I mean this literally. What is step one in the SDI process? Okay. Step one is an important one, and this is one that we need to pay attention to, and this is one we need to address and make sure that what we have is what we're providing for the kids, because it's the step for all services, and it's a step that we need to think about as a part of this. Okay, and so step one is making sure that we have formative assessment data on the child. For me, this is vital, that we have a very clear understanding of the child's needs. We have very clear understanding of what's going on with this child, and then we then compare it to the student's level of functioning in the district. Okay, and so we're thinking about this. We're basically we're looking at a really good present level statement, and a good present level statement takes information from every member of the team. Hey, you've probably heard me say something like that before. I'll say it again. Don't worry. It's going to hit it multiple times, because what does it take? It takes a village, but every one of us working together, but really understanding the students' process and things like this. Step two, okay? Again, think about this, is think about determining the student's knowledge. Okay, compare to the school norms, kind of look where we are with this, look at where the specially designed instruction is needed, look at what we can do to provide supports for this kid, kind of building on this, building so that we have an understanding of what we're supposed to do as a part of this process. This is a vital part of where we're going with this, and this is a vital part of what we can think about this. But think about what we're doing. Again, step 1 and 2 work together, but you have to think about them as making sure we're determining the student's knowledge so we can build on this. Okay, step 3. Okay, step 3 is be very specific about this. Think about the methodology for instruction. Now, I am a huge fan of UDL, in part because I'm married to an architecture historian who reminds me that UDL basically started in the architecture world. So yes, and there's a great podcast, I think, on about UDL that I'd be happy to share with people about this. But it really stems from the architecture world, and that's something about this. But also think about how we can then talk about direct instruction, how we can provide direct, explicit instruction to kids. Direct, explicit instruction that we can then provide services so that kids can make progress. That is our goal, and that's what we're thinking about this, and specially designed direct, explicit instruction for the kids. And that's what's important, is make sure that we have that as or we're doing this. So be very explicit about how you want the kids to learn, be very explicit about what you want the kids to learn, and be very explicit about where we're going with this. Okay, step 4. Okay, hey, wait, explicit, think about this. All right, said that before. Right? Is then you need to then think about how we're going to be very explicit about what we're doing, but then scaffold that instruction. Too often I see teachers who will teach something to the kids once or demonstrate to the kids once and then walk away. No, you stand there and you make sure the kid has it, and then you gradually fade away. But scaffold the supports necessary and gradually remove that scaffolding so what's going on, so that you can understand whether the kid is actually making progress, and then whether they actually have it. Because what those who've been teachers for years understand this. I've experienced this many times. Is that if you pull away too fast, the kid doesn't have an understand, or they internalize a wrong way to do something that poses problems long term that you then have to undo, and that sucks. So keep that in mind. Next, use high leverage practices. If you are not familiar with the high leverage practices, what I do recommend is you use the Google, type in CEC high leverage practices. These are practices that show a very good, consistent manner of providing supports for kids, providing supports so that kids can actually benefit from the education and make progress in the curriculum. I do recommend them highly. no pun intended. But I really do recommend it because people have spent a lot of time building this together and putting this. If you, I'm very, and I think there were some books that if you were, for those the intrepid individuals who braved the storm to come last week to FOI were there, you saw there were some books that they were passing out on high leverage practices. High leverage practices should be standard practices that are part of your curriculum. I don't want to spend time on this, but you should spend some time at seriously Google CEC high leverage practices, and it'll pull you right up to it. And there's wonderful materials, wonderful descriptions of what's going on. There are videos that are being put out on this on how to use them. The videos are often put out by Michael Kennedy, who's at the University of Virginia, my daughter's advisor as part of our special education program. But they're being put out there, so they're really good, and I applaud them. And you should use them, as much of them as absolutely possible. So keep that in mind, and they work across all settings. So keep that in mind about this. Okay, but be very explicit and scaffold and use HLPs. Next, monitor. Now, this is what's really interesting about this, right? And that is that we often just teach kids, but then we don't take data on what's going on. And this trips up many of us. This trips up many of us in the fact that we don't have any sense, yay or nay, whether the child is making progress appropriately in the curriculum. Why I say this is we need to monitor what's going on, because many of these kids who have disabilities, what we all know this. We all know this is that they've had disabilities for years. It's not like it's something that just happened last week and we're going to do one thing and magically solve or fix their problems. It often takes multiple examples, multiple ways of shaping or multiple ways of modeling that can improve the services for the kids and help them so that they can make progress in the curriculum. I mean this literally. This is something that you need to monitor, because monitor where we are with this, and monitor what we can do, and monitor what we can help with this, okay? And monitor help where we are with this. And I mean this, is that we need to think about this and pay attention to this, but monitor and make changes as needed, okay? So here, okay? Now, this is an important point, because often we think about the accommodation is STI. No, an accommodation is not STI. No. But teaching the student how to use an accommodation is a form of STI. So teaching the student how to do this is something that we need to pay attention to. And so what we have to think about this is what we have to think about how we can actually make progress in what's going on. Again, highlighting the team aspect is a part of this. Highlighting that we all learn this together. We're all monitoring, we're all paying attention, we're all working to address the specifics of the kids' needs. That's what's important. It's a part of this. Okay. Wait, there's more. All right. So I've got some examples. Okay. And these examples, I mean, these are just trying to get you in the ballpark to think about this. The ballpark to remind yourself of what's going on, or ballpark to pay attention to this and address the specifics of the needs. So first one, kid needs independence. Again, we're not just focusing on academics. I've purposely chosen the first example. There are multiple examples, don't worry. But the first example is not an academic one, but a behavior one. And what we're seeing is we think about this is what we have to think about is teaching the kid independence. For those of you who participate or observe the one that I did on working with administrators and supports for administrators, I recommend it. I was wound up at the time, so I apologize. What you have to think about as a part of this is you have to think, and I want you to change your attitude towards this. So instead of thinking of kids as just making demands on you, what you have to think about is kids are needing connections, and kids are demanding and wanting connections. So what we have to think about is what can we do to provide them connections? But independence is an important thing. So possible SDIs we could provide for them are a behavior contract or a timer. All right, you're gonna work on this, or what you're gonna look at a timer, a really effective timer. You see this in a lot of classrooms for kids with labeled as having autism, is what's something called the time timer, where basically it's a timer that shows how long they're going to work on something, and it counts down, because many kids don't have a sense of what's going on, of how long something is. I actually, when I write books, I actually use the time timer every single day. I'm going to work on this chapter for this next hour. I set the timer, turn off all my notifications. It's my own little contract with myself. I can't check email. I'm a huge fan of the YouTube, but I use that as a way of working independently, supporting my needs as opposed instead of having someone stand over me and say, you need to work on this chapter for this book right now. So that's an example. Okay. So another example. Okay. Environment causes problems. Okay. And I mean, some kids are having problems with SDIs or having problems in schools because the environment thinks about this. And there's many different things in the environment. Some of you have blower units in your classrooms in the winter that when the blower units come on, kids can't hear anything. Some of you have windows that you have open in the fall and the spring. And when the kids are on the playground, the kids can't hear anything outside your classroom. There's a variety of things. Folks sitting by the door, kids sitting by a kid who wiggles, kids sitting by a pencil sharpener. There's a variety of things that kids may have problems. But one thing we often think about this is as environmental cause, we often say, and you see this as an STI for a lot of kids, is that they're going to be sitting close to the teacher. I was involved in a classroom 3 years ago. Again, this is in the pre-times, where the teacher got her class roll. It was a fifth grade teacher, and she had 23 kids in her classroom. Nice size, great fifth grade classroom. 20 kids had priority seating close to the teacher, though. It was a general education classroom. And so she, the individual who I walk my dog with, she has a border collie also, and we're sitting there and we're walking our dogs. And what we're coming up with is, how are we going to get these 20 kids with priority seating close to the teacher? So what we came up with, and we eventually ditched this idea, but our initial idea is we were going to stack the kids on top of each other, stack the kids because they could all be closer to the teacher by stacking them. We realized that was not a feasible option and not one that we should do long term. So what she did is she set those 20 kids, basically the kids who had the priority seating, she set them in a U-shaped format, and she walked up and down this U all the time. She was just near them at all times. Things like this. Those 3 kids who did not have priority seating, she set them out in the field. She didn't care. So it didn't work really well, but they were going to do fine. But it's interesting about this is she didn't really set them on the field, but she is working in this U, things like this. And we have to think about this. Priority seating is one of the things we often put in kids' IEPs. Priority seating doesn't mean it has to be close to the teacher. For some kids, it's away from a blower unit. Some kids, it's closer to where the action is in the back where they're going to get more information. Some kids, it's a sightline kinds of things. You have to individualize it, and it may not be the same seat for every location. That kid may need to move for different things as a part of this. But just sitting the kid up closer to the teacher is not the solution for everything. And we need to keep that in mind as we talk about this. We need to keep in mind just placing a kid by the teacher is not going to often solve their problems. Things like this. But what it does is, you can see is one of the possible STIs as a proximity thing. Yeah, it can potentially work. Proximity control is a vital part of the process. And some of you experience this in proximity control. For instance, my son, when he had gone away to college, graduated from college, but when COVID hit, he had to move home. Proximity control, I know more what's going on. Sometimes I'm not always happy with what's going on, but I know. So it's interesting about this. What we need to think about is environment causes problems, how to work to reduce distractions. What can we do to reduce these distractions? Is it change of seats? It's a smaller group. What are we doing as a part of this? So we have to think about what can we do so that the kids make progress and if the environment causes problems. Another example, okay? Another example here, things like this, okay? Problems with pace. There are some students who just cannot master what's going on, that the pace of the curriculum is just too harsh, too fast. They just have trouble paying attention to what's going on. So there's a variety of things we can think about this, and it could be guided practice, guided notes. When I taught remedial history class, it was a lot of guided notes where basically there was chunks that were my notes, but with chunks missing, and the students had to pay attention so they could fill in that gap that was missing. My level of attention for the students went through the roof on that one because I graded them. You got to fill this in. I'm going to give you the information, but you got to be paying attention. And so it's really an interesting things like this. It focused them and helped them pay attention when we're with this. Pre-teaching special words, pre-teaching words that they need to pay attention to, pre-teaching concepts. That is something that we have to think about as part of this. Also, potentially providing reteaching. When I did some inclusion activities, is the teacher would go up and teach some activities, often a math lesson, and I would pull a group of kids in the back of the classroom off to a corner, and I would reteach that same lesson using the same examples, but often with different verbiage, and then some new examples so that the kids would get it and then practice closer with proximity to them and make sure that they had it, kinds of things. The last thing is providing them copies of notes. This is a common one when I teach my college classes. There's always a student or two who need some copies of the notes ahead of time, or just outlines, providing really structured outlines for the individuals. This is a part of this. And that's when you use PowerPoints. For many of you use PowerPoints, they in effect become a structured outline for telling you where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. So keep that in mind as about this, okay? Another one, okay? And this is one that we often think about, is time. Is some kids, and this goes along with the third example, the pace issue, is to think about this. And I'm trying to stay away solely from academic ones. I'm trying to think about behavioral issues and functional performance as a part of this. And I really am focusing on that, as you can see. But what you see here is you can see kids, and you might need extra time on things like this. Now, one of the things we often write, and this is my big complaint, for many kids who have Section 504 plans for ADHD, one of the most common things that we write for them is that kid will get extended time on tests, extended time to do things. And for many of you who have kids with ADHD, you often know that some of these kids are the first ones to be finished. So it needs to be tailored to the specifics of the kid and specifics of what the kid might require as a part of this. The other thing, extended time. I saw an IEP a few years ago where the child had unlimited time to turn in assignments. I want you to play out what unlimited time means. This child was a seventh grade boy, similar to Josh, that first example I gave to you a little while ago. But you think about this, is unlimited time. He could take 30 to 40 years to turn this in. Things like this. Nope, don't give no unlimited time. And it depends on the individual needs of the child, and it sometimes needs to be situationally specific. Because there's some kids who do not need it they don't need it for everything. Pay attention to this. Pay attention to the individual needs of the child, as opposed to, we're just going to give this kid all extra time on things. And when we give extra time, make sure that you provide it in a location that does not pose them problems. Why I say this? Well, I remember this very specifically when I was teaching. It was the first really warm day we had in March. I was teaching fifth grade at the time. About first really warm day we had in March, and I had a student teacher in my classroom. It was not me who made this fatal flaw. Just make sure you understand, it was not me. It was a student teacher who said to all the students, "Okay, as soon as everyone's finished with this test, we're going to go outside. We're going to go outside and romp and things like this. So just take your time," but things like this, right? There were two kids in the classroom who had extended time. It was a classroom of kids with learning disabilities, but there were two kids who needed extra time on this one, things like this. Okay? And they were the first ones who were done. They needed extra time, but they were not going to hold up the rest of the class. They were absolutely not going to hold up the rest of the class. And it posed significant problems for them because they didn't take time. So they both failed the exam because they just went through and just marked every answer. They got out because they weren't going to hold up what's going on. So then in effect, we don't pose them problems. Another example, and this one is in my college classes. One of my college classes it was a beautiful day in May. It was a student, it was our spring final exam. And a student got extra time, and basically everyone else in the class had an hour and a half to take the exam. He had 3 hours to take the exam. Beautiful day. And we're having some problems with our heating and cooling system, so the windows were open. And so the windows were open, and right outside the window was a beautiful field at my university, and there were people playing Frisbee. And the student who needed the extra time in the exam, ultimate Frisbee was his life. I'm a huge fan of ultimate Frisbee. I love the spirit of the game and the fact that it doesn't need referees. Tell me another sport that doesn't need referees. But the spirit of the game is vital, and I applaud how hard people work as a part of this. But they were out there practicing. He could hear them practicing as he's trying to take this test. All right. Everyone else has left the room. I said, just take the test. I'll shut the window. And I say okay, things like this. No, I know they're out there. I can see. So we moved to the other side of the building. Another side of the building, long hall, away from what's going on. I said, take your time. I'll stay with you. I'll just take whatever you need. I really want you to be able to do this. He goes in there and about maybe 6 minutes later, he comes back outside and he says, I can't focus. I know they're out there. I got to go out there. They're my brothers. I got to go. This is me. Things like this. So when we talk about extra time, it's not always the panacea that you want. And so you have to think about this. And it's not like we have to provide this. We have that we have to provide this, and when we have to think that the kid is just going to magically enjoy this. Taking tests longer is not always what you often want. So keep that in mind. So example 5, another example. There are some kids who have anxiety issues with task completion. And think about this. Sometimes when you're given a really large task, okay, when you're given a really large task, when you have to think about this, when you have to think about where we are with this, okay, so we think about where we are with is keep in mind is think about where we are and what we can do to break these things down. What can we do to break these things down and make it so that individuals understand where we're going with this? This is so very important. Chunking of tasks, modeling what's going on. I do for big projects that I have in my class. I always used rubrics. Do this part, this part, this part, this part, this part, this part. Show them models. Show them models of what an effective progress, things like this. Those are just those help make it easier for individuals to understand. They make it easier for us to pay attention. So I give you 5 very different examples, but it's not just focusing on academics. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. More on SDI. Okay, who should design this? And I mean this, who should design this is we should, I said this earlier, but it should be the team working in conjunction with typically the special education person would be to take the charge on this, but we need to talk about this. Can we really provide all the kids proximity control close to the teacher? Is that something that's even an option for these kids? Is that something we can do? Or is there something else we need to do as a part of this? So keep that in mind as the next one. So how to monitor, okay? How to monitor what it is we need to make sure that we're regularly monitoring about this and that we're paying attention to where we are with this, okay? And so it's not just that we basically give the kids some supports and let them run with this. We need, as I said before, monitor whether this works. Monitor and ensure it's still that the child's making progress. Too often, what we do for these kids is we give this kid a tool, a technique, and then we don't actually monitor what's going on with this. Pay attention to this, okay? So I've been talking broadly about what specially designed instruction is. Let's talk about important points like what it is not. And I mean this literally, okay? What it is not, okay? It isn't just supplanting the core curriculum. And I mean that literally. We're not just going to take the core curriculum and supplant that and provide this to the kids and say, hey, run with this, kinds of things like this. It's not just something that's brand spanking new for the kids, things like this. Second, it's not just placing a child in the general education classroom and say, hey, good luck there. Good luck there. Because, and I'm a huge fan of inclusion. I really am. And we can do a better job of providing inclusion for many of these kids. I absolutely mean this. When we need to have the team, get this, back to that point again, the team working together to provide this, okay? But we can't just use what I refer to as the P and P approach to inclusion, where we place and pray that it works, okay? We actually need to give the kids tools and the teachers tools so they understand what can be done as a part of this. So it's not just that. And specially designed instruction also is not just what the student does. It's not just what the student does, it's what we do for the student. We're the ones providing the specially designed instruction. It's not the student providing the specially designed instruction, okay? Next thing, it's not just a restatement of the academic content standards being taught. We're just not going to restate, here, you need to redo this, kinds of things. Next thing, it's not just a commercial program. Specially designed instruction is not just a commercial program. There are commercial programs out there, but we need to make sure that what we're providing for the kids is appropriate instruction and what we can do to help with them as part of this. Okay, so that's something that we need to focus on this and keep this. Okay, but I really want you to pay attention to and address this. Okay, and pay attention to where we are with this. Okay, the next thing, it's not just changing the kids' schedule. Okay, because too often we just change the schedule and think that. But finally, what is specially designed instruction? Also not important. This is really important. It's not an excuse for setting low expectations or teaching below grade level. Okay, That is not just, it's not just an excuse, because what is our goal is to raise these kids up. And I mean this literally. Our goal is to raise these kids up and provide additional supports for them and help them about this as much as possible. Okay. So keep that in mind. So what it really is, okay, what it really is, okay, it's an addition to the core instruction. It supplements the core instruction. It's a service. It's a support to the kids. It's what the general education and special education teacher and related service personnel do to help the kid. It's not just what the kid does, it's what we do, okay? It's based on teaching specific skills a student does not have in order to access and make progress. So we have to think about this. Earlier, what drives this process? What does the student need? What are the present levels? How can we move this kid forward? Okay. It's unique instruction. And absolutely the most important thing, it's specifically tied to the individual needs of this student. It's tied to this student. It's not tied to another student. It's not tied to a specific disability label. It's tied to this student. Okay. But it is instruction that allows the kid to make progress, okay? The progress so that the kid can understand what's going on with this and think about where we are with this. So I highlighted this before. So what drives the process? Here, I'll show you what drives the process. The PLAF statement, the present level statement, it's the student's needs. When I'm identifying a kid's specially designed instruction needs, what I do is I go through the present level statement and I go through in great detail, I mean this literally, and identify the specific needs this kid has and how the disability is manifested and try to do this. Okay. So I identify it through this and where are we kids and what's different as a part of this. I'm reiterating something I said a few minutes ago, but I want to also read it. It's what the teacher does. Okay? It's what the teacher does. It's what the teacher does to improve where we are with this. Okay. So keep this in mind as we address this. Okay. So I'm going to give you some examples of some things that I've developed for Guam, which I've actually seen photocopied and used in other states now. It's amazing how this is getting around. But I developed this for Guam and talk about this and keep this in mind is pay attention to this. And this you'll have copies of this. This will be made available for you. But you can see instruction in multiple modalities. There is no evidence whatsoever that identifying a kid's primary modality, whether they're visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or tactile, will provide assistance to them. We in special education use multiple modalities, whatever it takes to get into kids. We're not going to identify one. We're going to work with that kid as much as like this. So you can see what the teacher does down the left-hand column, what the student needs. And you can see all the different things that are different as a part of this. Direct instruction, accessing the academic environment, and using context clues, using visual word recognition strategies, word analysis strategies. But you can see on the right, extended time, highlighted materials, colored overlays, photocopied materials, referred color paper, tracking guides, type and speak, manipulatives, slant board, magnifier, copy of notes. There are a variety of things we can get that the student needs, what the supplementary aids and services. We often need to list these in the student's IEP, and that's important as part of this, okay? That's just some reading examples. Here are some math ones. Multisensory teaching ones, modeling, direct instruction, computation strategies, direct instruction, use of a calculator. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen teachers, here, kid, here's a calculator, okay? Here's a calculator, right? And my best example I can give to you this is a few years ago, we were thinking about changing cell phone providers. And when you change cell phone providers, it's a big deal, things like this. But I went to the local cell phone store, and they wanted to sell you on a 2-year contract. And I said, so how much? And they said, we have all these benefits, all these programs, all these things that have assistance. And I was buying them for my wife and my 2 kids, the 4 of us. We're going to give four new cell phones on this program. And I said, well, how much is it going to cost me over 2 years? Things like this, because there's a 6-month buy, there's a 12-month benefit, and there's other things like this. So we sat there and did all the calculations, and he said, no one's ever asked me to do this before, but I'll do the calculations I've got a calculator, I can show you how to do this. He did all the calculations and came up with, it's going to cost me over 2 years, $32,500 to actually implement this cell phone program for my family for the next 2 years. I said, you sure? He said, yep, it says right here on the calculator, must be right. We need to teach calculator skills. We absolutely need to teach calculator skills. When the actual bill was $3,250. $3,250. He was off by a decimal or so, or 1,000. But it's interesting about this. So we ended up not going with that cell phone provider. We went with another one where it was actually $3,250 instead of $32,500. And I share this with you is sometimes we often just say, here, kid, here's a calculator, run with this. But you can see supplementary aids and services for the kids, what services about this. Okay, just classic examples. More special design instruction following directions, what the teacher does, what the student needs as a part of this. Okay, so keep these in mind as we talk about this. But why is this important? Is we need teams to work together. We absolutely need teams of special education and general education teachers to work together to implement this. And we need administrators to come in and monitor this to ensure that the kid is actually making progress, and the teachers need this, getting the supports necessary to do what they are doing, and that they have the time to implement what's going on. This is vital for everyone. This is vital, and I can't emphasize this enough. Okay, so daily considerations about this. All right. Okay, so daily considerations is, I can't emphasize this enough, is we have a variety of daily considerations. Is you need to see, is the kid anxious? Is the kid making progress? Is the kid understand what's supposed to be doing about this? We may have to implement and change what we're doing on a daily basis, but make sure that the team is aware of this, and make sure the team understands where we are with this, and make sure the team understands what we need to do to provide appropriate services. Okay, so keep this in mind as we talk about this. Okay, so I'm going to switch away from SDI specific things, but I'm going to highlight some things that we need to work on as team members to pay attention to this. Okay, so first, get the general education teachers involved in this. When developing the content of a student's IEP, make sure it's based on current, relevant data, that it's based on academic and functional behaviors this kid is engaging in. Yes, we get data from general education teachers. Thank you very, very, very much. But we need to make sure it's current, relevant, and tied not just to academics, but also ties to the specifics of how the kid is doing academically. Pay attention to this, and pay attention to this, what's going on with this. And I can't emphasize this enough for where we are with this. Wait, there's more. You heard me say this before, but as the team, working together as the team, or this line before, continuously monitor and measure the child's progress. Continually monitor what's going on and demonstrate, and so that they can demonstrate that the progress is being made. This is vital. This is absolutely vital for us to understand what's going on. This is vital because we need to pay attention to where we are with this, and we need to pay attention to what we can do to support that child. Because this is something that we need to ensure that we're doing as a part of this. Just placing, I mean, we sometimes, and I say this in many other venues, we spend an enormous amount of time writing and developing IEPs, and then we don't monitor their effectiveness and what's going on with the child. So what we have to think about this is pay attention to this. Okay, next, why should goals be measurable? If you can't measure it, it don't count. And I mean this. I do witness preparation for a lot of due process hearings, or people fixing to get ready for due process hearings. Sorry, Southernism creeping through there. But it's interesting about this is we often don't have data that we can count, and we need to focus on that as opposed to this. Okay, and we're required to measure progress on a regular basis. So it's something that we need to be doing, and something that we need to pay attention to as a part of this. Okay, and general education teachers, you may not be aware of this, but all parents are to get updates about how their child is doing on their goals and objectives at the same frequency that non-disabled kids get report cards, basically. So special education teachers are providing updates to the parents of these kids who are eligible for special ed on the progress on their goals and objectives. And this is something we need to do every marking period. So keep this in mind as we talk about this. Okay. Next. Okay. This is, again, you've heard me say this in other venues. I'm happy to say this. Okay. I will say, if the SDI that we're providing to the kid is not working, okay, if it's not working, what we need to think about is what we can do to change. Okay, we need to change where we're going and change what we're doing. Okay, so it must be important for where we are with this, and it's something that we need to alter. We need to alter where we are with this, and alter what we're doing, and make sure that we're doing and improving the services. And that's what's vital, is that we're altering the curriculum, and we're not just staying stagnant. And I can't emphasize that enough. More. Okay, so progress monitoring, taking regular data, And this is where general education teachers come in. We can use our aides or paraprofessionals. How's the kid focusing on their grades? How are they doing on their grades? How they're focusing in the classroom? Are they having problems? I mean, one of the things we often see is we see kids engage. I know this is nothing new to you, but it hit me over the head. Is we see kids engage in behaviors when they want to get out of work. Imagine that. We see kids engage in behaviors when they don't want to be doing something. So they engage, they sharpen their pencil, they drop their pencil on the floor, they spend time underneath their desk, they go to the bathroom. And what we see is kids in being very impressive, truly very impressive about what they do to get out of work, when we should actually focus on what they should be doing as a part of work. Okay. But we need to pay attention and regularly monitor this one, right? Okay. So keep this in mind. So can you monitor? Can you, so whatever the problem the child has as part of that present level, or do we have a way of monitoring whether they're making progress? Do we have a way that can be included so that the parents can be highlighted and aware of where we are with this? Okay. And do we have ways of actually addressing the needs for the child so that we can address what's going on? Okay. But our obligation, so this brings us back to the team. Okay. Our obligation as a team, it starts with a free, appropriate public education. And I mean this literally. This is our obligation. Special education is a field defined by a law, and the law focuses on whether kids get a FAPE. This is truly what we're focusing on, and this is what we have to pay attention to. So when we develop the IEP, we're developing an IEP that hopefully will help the kid make progress, and that's important about this. Okay, so I'm going to skip down. Okay, I'm skipping down to some other things. Yeah, you can see I got a lot that I can talk about. Okay, so just keep this in mind as we talk about this. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of things relating to behavioral data collection. And so we have to think about this is what do we mean by behavioral data collection? Is we need to think about this. I focus on this because we too often focus on academics. Okay. So we're seeing most of the teachers that I'm having problems with kids, it's because of the behaviors the kids manifest. So what we think about is how much behaviors we're having, and so where are these behaviors emphasizing? So what we need to think about is keeping track of this. So what you have to think about this as a part of this is making sure we're making data-based decisions on things. And so what we're measuring are things that are clearly observable and clearly are measurable. That if somewhere else were to come in the classroom, they would understand precisely what we're measuring. They would get the same count as us. They would understand where we are with this, and they would be able to do this. So things, and I mean this very literally, is there are terms that we should not be using when we talk about problem areas. We need to make sure that we don't talk about this, is that we don't describe the kid as just being weird, despite the kid may seem weird, okay? We don't describe the kid as crazy, lazy, or strange. We describe the specifics of the behaviors that this kid manifests. And that's what's important, is we highlight what the kid needs to pay attention to, and we focus on this and address this. So we have to come up, so how do you do this? You need to come up with a clear definition of what we're actually focusing on. Identify the behavioral issue that we understand, okay? When you're defining, and I mean this literally, and this is a visual reference, so hopefully you'll be able to see me as a part of this. But I had a definition where I asked kids, where my definition is for on tasks is when they were doing seat work, is that they had their pencil in their hand and they were looking down at their assignment. That was my definition of on task. If they were sharpening their pencil, despite the fact they may need their pencil sharpened in order to do the work, it did not count. If they were reaching under their desk for a calculator so they could do the work, that still wasn't clear. But I had kids who would be like this, working on their papers, things like this. And I had a kid who looked like he was working, like things like this. He was snoring because he was asleep. I'm not a snorer, so it's interesting about this, but I was only able to identify this because I thought he was doing well. Become very clear what your definition. Because what I often see is I see teachers describe kids as out of control. The heck does that mean? Out of control, all right? So come up with very clear definitions of what the kid is engaging in and the behaviors that are part of this. So then plan some data collection. And use aides, use administrators, come in, talk about. There's different ways of data collection, but the big ones I often teach aides or paraprofessionals is just frequency and duration. Best example of this, I taught an aide The kid had I taught an aide to take data on a child who had problems relating to being out of seat. I sat on one, and we were doing a frequency count. I was doing a frequency count on this, and I was sat on one side of the classroom, the aide sat on the other side of the classroom. And so during the time, during the 45-minute class period, during the 45 class minute period, the kid was out of his seat only once. So out of that time when we were done, I met with a paraprofessional. That paraprofessional was very proud, held up the sheet and said, "One, got my one." He was out of his seat once, things like this. What was important in that 45 minutes, the kid was out of his seat for 42 of the 45 minutes. So we'll maybe also take duration data, things like this. Latency, yeah, possible. That's a hard one. You have to stare at the kid for a while. And that might alter the directives where we're at this. But think of the audience. Think of the audience of what we can do as a part of this. And think of what we can pay attention to this. But when you're taking data collection, take different cycles, take different days, take different times, take different prompts, see what's going on so that you can pay attention to what's going on, paying attention to where we are with the kid and focus on this. But pay attention to data. And that's one thing as teams we need to focus on as a part of this, okay? So I'm gonna go to the end here, things like this, and to think about this. And what I want you to think about is I want you to pay attention to this, okay? I surveyed my undergrads. My undergrads, they suffered a lot with me. I'm aware of that, but I surveyed them. And when I asked them to describe, and these are a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds in my class last semester. And what I asked them to do is describe what their ideal kid, what their kid is going to be like when they get older. And these are individuals who do not have kids. I said it doesn't obligate you to have a kid, but just if you're going to have a kid, what is your kid going to be like? And I want you to think about this. This is what they came up with. Happy, friendly, well-behaved, outgoing. You just pick what you want, teacher pleaser, enthusiastic, who's pretty, things like this. This is what they came up with. This is what they came up with. This is their expectations. This is their expectations of what we are talking about as a part of this. And this is what they're thinking about. And think about this is my wife and I, we were married for almost 9 years before we had a kid. I don't remember that time. I do remember finishing sentences. And I do remember eating what we wanted to eat and watching what we wanted to watch. I do remember those times. But think about this, is we had a lot of time to think about what our kids were going to be like, things like this, when we did have kids. And I realized my role in the process is very different than my wife's. But I share this with you, is this is the expectation. This is the expectation that these individuals have. Think about this. The reality is there are some kids who have disabilities, who have autism or deaf or PDD, or they're not independent, no friends, or people shuns or teacher dislikes or things like this. So what I want you to think about is when you have a parent who's part of our team, who's part of our village, who's going to be raising and working with these kids, please respect the parents, honor the parents, pay attention to the parents. Pay attention to the parents' needs, pay attention to the parents' statements, and make sure that you pay attention to what the parent is asking for. Why? Because it's vital. We need to pay attention to what them and make sure that we're paying attention and addressing them. Because a parent is living a reality that is very different from what they dreamed. And we need to provide supports for them. So keep this in mind as we talk about this as part of our teams. Keep that in mind. All right. So last, this is me. Well, that's me. I've lost some weight since then. But I was a teacher. I was a building administrator, hearing officer. I work regularly with school districts as a part of this. I just want to let you know that our goal is to support you. And the IEP Resource Center has a wealth of knowledge and wealth of resources that I truly think that you should avail yourself of. You're lucky. Why I mean this is I know what goes on in other states. You don't realize how good you really have it in Indiana. Take advantage of the services, take advantage of the supports, take advantage of what you have there. And I really want to emphasize this, okay? And so keep this in mind as we address this. I appreciate what you do for kids. I appreciate the service you provide, and I appreciate all that you're doing to work with this. But it does take a team to provide these services. So go off, do good deeds, and keep in touch with the IEP Resource Center. Thank you very much.